would. We haven't signed up with Prometheus Entertainment and History Channel and Discovery Channel. So we're going to have to just sign up right here with our group, iHeart and Vox Nest and, BTR, and do our part here. We have our little office in the sky with God, and I feel like God knows who we are, and we're doing God's work.
Yeah.
But I also feel like we started knowing of his people that come and go in the universe, in the multiverses. And a lot of us know that part of the higher source or the critical mass mind or cognitive intelligence, because consciousness is subjective and objective and subjective. It needs a subject to prove that science and philosophy exists, and all that. The churches came from the people that knew there was higher sources. And back in the day, they really could talk to God that would come and visit the planet, our other planets, other universes, other multiverses. And we say the universe, multiverse, metaverse, universe, omniverse, alphaverse, and omegaverse, 7 levels of the 7 heavens. Now, I can talk this stuff all day, but Ken and I, being in a 3D, going to the 5D is what they say, because they jump over time and space in the 4th dimension, but it's just another way of speaking, a language. But philosophically, Ken, you and I crossed paths in the Clear Lake, and it was when I first got there, 66. We moved there in Houston in 65. I lived on 1313 Heights Boulevard, Houston, Texas. Went to James. First, I went to Hamilton Junior High and moved to James Madison High School out in a brand new part of the southwest part of Houston before I married my husband in 67 when I met Sonny and Cher. In 67, I was a Houston spinneret, but then we moved out to League City. First we moved to Pasadena and the South Houston area. Now, you, in 69, you were living there, weren't you?
As a matter of fact, I'm making a little notes here. We were in that subdivision of south of Houston called Beverly Hills, would you believe? And that's where we lived. Oh, wow, I lived for 7 years or more than that, in which I spent the whole time working originally with Grumman Aerospace Corporation that built the lunar modules, and I was one of the, since I was a pilot from the Marine Corps, I was one of the civilian astronauts that tested the lunar modules in the vacuum chambers and helped to train the regular NASA astronauts so that when they took the craft and went all the way to the moon and back, that it was natural. Now, like Buzz Aldrin, I dealt with him an awful lot. Neil Armstrong. By the way, Neil Armstrong is now checked out on us. He's no longer with us very recently. And that I'm sure was right in the very same area that you were in. Now, see, I went into the Marine. Gosh, I hadn't thought about that in a while, but back in the Marine Corps, I guess it was 1960. Or that's ancient history for most of the people who be listening to this. They'll say, wow, these folks are old. But, relatively speaking, I think I'm still about as young as I need to be. And we'll see if we can't spark and stir and get my brain functioning real good. Now, as far as the religion is concerned, raised up in a little town called Hart, H-A-R-T, 250 people. And that's where I stepped forward and accepted God as my Savior and Jesus, and became we had a youth group there. I forgot exactly what the Baptist Church did. But in that little town of Hart, there were 2 churches. Well, the Baptist Church was the one that ran the little town, and I've forgotten exactly what the other one was. But we would have the pastor would pick a different family to go and have dinner with after church on Sundays, and so in those days we had to be very careful about what we said and where we went, because there was someone always there that's watching would certainly turn right around and call the minister. Did you know what Ken was doing? He was so we tried not to get ourselves into too much trouble, and try to lead a good life. And I think in reality, when we go back over, and it's been a real pleasure, TJ, with you to sit down and go back over some of the things that you've done and I've done, and we've crossed paths. It's amazing that we're talking about history. And
well, it's important for us to remember and to get down the archives, and that's what I promised to do a long time ago with my husband in Kentucky years ago. Started archiving as Facebook and ACO.
You faded out of
and working at a newspaper there. And then we went to the local churches, with his sisters. And I went with Les Johnston to a non-denominational in Hartford, Kentucky. And then he provided services for my husband. And he was a friend of ours in that family. They were all preachers. And my husband was 109 years old.
You're phasing out occasionally back and forth, so I'm starting to lose you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got my TVs off, but I've signed up to do the show. I'm using my old phone. Me and you need new phones, but I don't want to get my new phone till I go check it out. They won't turn on till the 8th, so that's, excuse me, folks, Tuesday. So we'll have a better line for me on Tuesday with AT&T Prime. But who are you with on your phone? But if you don't move it around, but who are you with there, your carrier?
I have no clue. That's something that Fran takes care of for me. So I'm with a cell phone, a little cell phone that I'm carrying in one hand and trying not to bang it against things and make it pop in people's ears. So right now, I'm holding it about 3 inches away from my mouth. And
I apologize for fading out. It's because Mediacom is cable, and I get my internet through them. And the way that AT&T, the gentleman that sold me my new Galaxy Samsung phone, said, "Ma'am, you'll be better off live streaming direct." So this is something new, Ken, that a lot of people our age may not know or understand, because we understand browsers, Google, we understand Microsoft and how to use our computers and our phones. But there's so much technology now in our reality that it's easy for the kids to pick up, but they don't care as long as their parents are paying for the phones. I'm sure a lot of people out there know what I'm talking about. Give me my computer, let me play my games. But a lot of our people that I talk to out there on the internet, or they tell me, their kids don't want to go to work in school, so they're having to make them. I had to make my grandson at 21 years old, who'd been with me since he was 17, in and out of trouble, but his mother passed. My daughter, which Gigi, you remember ACO, and you went through that with me in 2017 when you and I met at the University of Southern Alabama. Right. And you and I were talking about doing this, what we're doing today, more often, and it's taken us a couple of years to get it going again. But, here, I use the tools I'm given, but my daughter was much better at it. But unfortunately, a lot of people in this area weren't allowed when it came to phones. And when I drove a big truck coast to coast and pulled for Microsoft and U.S. Treasury and went on base because I had a clearance, a lot of people, wherever I went, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't buy a new phone or get coverage. So AT&T was had the oldest towers, and that's history now, folks. But in our church, back in the day, you couldn't do what we're doing here as easy as we can now, and we're still having trouble. And we'd like everybody to be able to get online around the world. So we're all working on that in a church sort of way. But Ken, you don't know your carrier, so do you have cable TV, or does it come in on the satellite? Do you know that part?
It comes in by satellite. Pretty sure of that. We don't have an antenna up. We don't have an antenna up on top of the house. We have it that way. That's ancient.
Okay. Well, folks, we may talk highbrow with our spirit and our conscious to a lot of people that want to come on and talk when they feel the divine calling to do so with me as our Ascension Cosmos Oracles. But Ken and I have an interesting background in the Southern Baptist, or in Southern, and so we went to church on Sundays, and then we had chaplains in the military. And then I went on Sundays through boot camp. Ken, when you were over here at Pensacola, where'd you go to boot camp? Did you go to military Pensacola, or where? Because I was go ahead.
No, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, and then went over for the officer pilot training there in Pensacola. So.
I went to Memphis, Millington, NAS. I was assigned there firsthand, and then again they threw me back over to corpsman. It was really confusing for me. They jumped me from a corpsman to a NAS air traffic controller to a NIS investigative services to security manager. I never knew who or what I was going to be. So what were you when you went to Memphis? What was that?
Memphis, Tennessee. I went to aviation, electronics, communications training for a couple of years, so that all of the electrical equipment I was enlisted and active in the Marine Corps at the time, but as a I don't know what the right term is. I was not an officer at the time that I went through the flight training, and then I went out to El Toro out by Santa Maria, California. That's where I lived, and so that's where that went. And then while I got picked up by officer pilot training while I was enlisted, and I went back to the South, back to Pensacola, and then went into flight training at that point. So I went both as enlisted. Oh, that's another history story to talk about there. How come I wound up going enlisted when my dad was a captain in the Army Air Corps during World War II. That's when he lost his life in there. But so with me getting into officer pilot training was another step back up to be more like my dad. That's what I wanted to be. And then while I lived in a little town called Hart, Texas, I was the third child of the family, and I'm the only one left. But Jimmy James Charles Johnston was 17 months older than me, and he lost his life on a school hayride when he had illegal aliens coming up from below the border, and they out drunk, and they ran into the tractor and turned the tractor over on him when they were out doing a hayride for the youth in high school. So,
oh my!
And as soon as I had the opportunity to be like my dad, I had a good friend. Gosh, they're all gone now. That's something else. Jack Lancaster. He had joined the Oklahoma Military Academy in Claremore, and so I wanted to become like my dad and wear a uniform the whole bit. So my mother agreed, since my oldest brother, A.R., had moved back to Oklahoma and to go to Oklahoma University, and that just left her with me since Jimmy died. And so she allowed me to sign up and go to the Oklahoma Military Academy, which doesn't exist anymore. That's kind of how I wound up getting away from the little town of 500 people, or 250 people is what it was. Excuse me. Out in the country and raised on the farm. So I have the experience of being a country boy and a farmer and working, plowing, you name it, I've done it. And then on off into pilot training and flying. And when we were in the little town of Hart, we had I'm trying to think what time during the year, but it would be a big countrywide event where all the people would get together, and we'd have dunk tables, where someone would set out on a board, and people would throw baseballs to hit the little trip, and they'd drop them into a barrel full of, not a barrel, but I should say a big water tank, so that we would get dropped in the water. It was so much fun, and we just hoped that they would hit the lever and drop us in the water because it was too hot. So those are kind of the things that I grew up with, and that is as a country boy. And then when I left and went off to military school, then I started learning I wanted to be just like my dad, and on up, then I became a pilot. and from there, and then while I was with